right. Hey, Victoria. I see you in the chat. Thanks for being here. All right. And let me switch over to where you guys can actually see me. Welcome, Renee. I see you in the chat as well. Maud as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I see you on YouTube as well. You are Dollar from Bangladesh. Well, hello, Dollar. Welcome. And glad you're here. All right, looks like the gang's all here. We're just about ready to get going here. Let me do one more thing, and then I think we can kick off the stream the proper way. Let me go ahead and switch over to my computer. We're going to be doing a little bit about Lightroom and just photo management and photo editing tips in general. Hey, Andy, good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world as well. All right, so let me switch over. And I think we can go ahead and start that one too. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Adobe Students. I'm streaming here live on the Adobe Student channel here on Facebook, but of course on multiple other channels as well. So welcome. We're going to be talking today a bit about tips and tricks on editing and managing your photos in Lightroom Classic CC. A lot of what I'll talk about is also applicable to Lightroom CC, depending on what it is. I'll let you know one way or the other. And if you can hear that buzzing in the background, that's the lawn guys out front. Hopefully they'll be gone in just a minute. I think they're just about wrapping up. So Jerry, welcome. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive into some of these tips and tricks, and we'll just go. All right, so first thing, I've got Lightroom Classic CC open, and you notice that I'm in a collection set called Demo, and I'm in a particular collection called 7 Things. This was actually some photos I'd gathered together from a previous stream that I'd done on 7 ways or 7 things you can do to your photos to make them look better. So a couple of these photos we'll use again, and of course we'll use a bunch of new ones that we haven't used before. We'll also talk about some things that I hadn't talked about before on that particular stream. But one of the tips right off the bat is that whether you're in Lightroom Classic CC or whether you're in Lightroom CC, you have the ability to manage your photos in these Lightroom collection, or Lightroom Classic calls them collection sets. Lightroom CC calls them folders. That could be confusing because also Lightroom Classic has folders. But as far as organization is concerned, think of collections as your photo albums. That's what Lightroom CC calls them. They call them albums. And its collection sets or folders in the organizational sense is a way to organize all of these albums or collections. So with that said, I know there's a difference in terminology, and that could be confusing, especially if you're using one or the other, if you're watching a class on one or the other. But I will do my best to explain the differences between them. I just jumped to a different collection. All right, so with that said, one of the things that you can do to just make photo editing a little bit better, a little bit easier, is just a little bit understanding of what to look for when you're editing a photo. What kinds of things should you be looking for to make your photos look better in the first place? Because in other words, unless you know what's wrong or what could potentially be wrong, you'll look at a photo and say, well, everything looks okay. What do I need to fix? What is there to change? And if the photo looks okay to you, well, good. At the end of the day, you're the judge. It's your photo. But certain things you may not know to look for if you're new to this or you are a student, like one of our students on our student channel here. So with that said, wish this was applicable for the mobile version. Actually, it is. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is applicable for Lightroom CC on mobile. As a matter of fact, everything I've said so far is applicable to Lightroom CC on mobile. Managing your collections as albums in Lightroom CC. It also has folders in Lightroom CC. So everything I've said applies to mobile as well so far. All right, so one of those things right off the bat is when you take a picture of a landscape, or of a skyline. I meant to say skyscraper, or forget it. You take a picture of a skyline or skyscrapers or just tall buildings, and you're taking them from the ground. Well, typically you end up in a situation where the buildings themselves look like they're leaning over. And you're excited. You're in this beautiful new location. You're in this beautiful city, and you're looking up and you're taking all these great pictures. And we're so used to looking at them leaning over like this that we don't even think about it anymore unless it's been called to your attention. Once you can see that the photo, oh yeah, that building in the middle looks like it's about to fall that way, and the building on the left of it's going to fall that way, and the building on the right is going to fall this way. Once you see it, it's hard to not see it from that point on. So let's go ahead and fix it. One of the things you can do to kind of help the process right off the bat is throughout Lightroom, whether it's mobile, Lightroom CC, or Lightroom Classic, you have lens profile corrections. So if I click the lens profile correction and it can identify what camera was used to take this, it will automatically do some corrections right off the bat. In this case, it didn't. So if I knew which camera it was, I can go pick it and go correct it that way, but that's still not going to fix the building leaning problem. What that will fix, and I'll show it on a different photo, is a lot of the bowing of the lens, like where it looks like it's kind of bloated a little bit in the middle, or there's vignetting, those dark edges around the edge. That's usually taken care of by the lens profile correction. But let's go on and move on to the transform. So again, you can do what I'm about to do in all Lightroom CCs, whether it's Lightroom CC on mobile, Lightroom CC, or Lightroom Classic CC on the desktop. All right, so with that said, you notice that in your transform, and I believe on Lightroom Mobile it's called geometry, you've got this ability to, well, turn it off. It's off by default. Do auto, guided, full, vertical, or level. Now, I usually just click on auto right off the bat just to see what I get. And auto is doing a really good job. It's actually straightened it up quite a bit. It didn't straighten it up 100%, but it got it looking a lot better than it did. And auto, up until now, you'd have to either live with that, or if you wanted to tweak it some more, you'd have to go all the way into the sliders down here and figure out which slider you'd need to slide. And of course, sliders are great. They're one way or the other, until you got it looking right. Well, now there's a much easier, faster, better way with guided upright. So if I turn that back off, let's switch over to guided. Guided is based on 2 or more guides. Usually 2, sometimes 3, maybe even 4, but usually no more than 4 because it starts to get diminishing returns. So when you drag out your first guide, nothing's going to happen. So for example, when I drag out a guide, and what I'm looking for is to drag out the guide on edges that should be straight. So this edge should be straight, but it's not. And again, like I said, the first time you do it, nothing's going to happen because it takes at least 2 guides. Then I'd go to the next offending shape or building in this case, and I'd say, well, this one should be straight. And as soon as I let go on this guide, it begins to straighten the photo because it says, oh, you want those edges straight. Now, that may not be favorable to your crop, and in this case it's not, but we'll get the building straight up and down first, then we'll worry about the crop. And you could even go as far as to say, well, hey, I think this building should be straight across the top, and it will begin to do things like that as well. So it will even help me further getting these buildings perfectly in the right perspective as if I were looking at them straight on. So that's great. Now, what about the crop problem? Well, I can fix that one of 2 ways. I can either just go to crop and crop it down, or while you're in this same space, if you wanted to keep the same exact size, you could scale it up a bit without hurting the resolution of the image too much, especially with the high megapixel cameras that we have today. All right, so that's the guided upright, and now you'll never look at tall buildings the same again. You'll look, wait, those buildings aren't straight. They should be using upright to make that straight. All right, so someone's asking me, is that the World Trade Center? I don't believe so, because I believe the World Trade Center was 2 buildings, not 1. All right, so let's go ahead and get off that one. Now let's move on and let's talk about a situation where you have a photo that either isn't the right color or isn't the right, like it just looks misty or hazy. So I got a couple of examples. I've got a few examples of those actually. So for example, if I jump over to my dehaze collection here, I've got several photos that I could add more. I could add a little dehaze to make them look a bit better. So for example, let's take this tree. This tree looks like it's smoky, foggy, just not a great day happening outside. And of course, you've got the ability, and you've had the ability now for a couple of years. We moved it in Lightroom Classic to the basic panel. In Lightroom CC, it's still in the effects panel. But you've got the ability to go in and just simply drag the dehaze slider to get rid of some of that atmospheric haze. Now, with every slider, there's a chance of diminishing returns or overdoing it. A lot of times, especially with dehaze, if you're not careful, if you drag it too far, you're going to be in a situation where it starts to hurt the image, even though it looks like it may be helping it. If you zoom in, it'll start making the image a little blotchy or a little muddy or a little bad in certain areas. So I always say check, don't drag it over any further than you think you need to. So for example, this was 0. And if I take it back over, well, can I stop there or could I keep going? And if I keep going, what's it going to look like when I zoom in? Now, luckily, it's not doing too bad of a job on this photo. I can still see a little grain here, but I think that was already there in that particular photo. But if you get in a situation where you're taking it too far and it's hurting parts of the image, just back off of it a little bit. And you can always go and apply dehaze as a selective adjustment. So what I mean by that is you could go into either your adjustment brush, your radial filter, or your graduated filter. Let's take the adjustment brush, for example. We'll switch it to dehaze, and we'll apply we'll use it as a brush, and we'll just paint in a little dehaze in the areas where maybe it's not hurting the photo as much. So you can always paint in more and you can always turn that adjustment up or down. So wherever you're brushing, that can be, see, that's what I mean by it starts to hurt the photo. That's too much dehaze. So I would definitely back off until it's no longer hurting the photo and I can still see the effect. And I can, of course, keep painting it up here as well. That's all part of one adjustment, unless I tell it to make a new brush stroke and start making a new adjustment. So you can always paint in a little more in the areas that you don't, that's not hurting the photo or not hurting the photo as much as the global adjustment was. So keep that in mind. You can use most of these effects either as global adjustments, which means it's adjusting the entire photo, or local adjustments or selective adjustments where you're using the brush, radial filter, and graduated filter, and yes, even on mobile and even in Lightroom CC. So you can do it across the board. All right. I don't know the answer to that question. Anything wrong with the format, LTR format, and XML format in Lightroom? I don't know. It's beyond me. All right, so with that said, let's go on and let's keep going. Another thing that can, I got a good example for this one. Let's see if I can find it here. Let's go to this one. Yeah, okay. So I got a good example here, and this will help you when you're taking photographs to begin with, as opposed to having to do it or fix it after the fact. So for example, I've got 2 photos here of the same person. They might even be the same photo. No, I don't think so. No, they're 2 different ones. Okay, you notice how this one, I'm kind of zoomed out a little bit. I'm backing away from the subject and leaving way more headroom than I normally use, or in some cases, way more foot room than I would normally use. That's because I post to Instagram. And if you're posting a portrait to Instagram, Instagram is less forgiving for how tall a digital image is compared to how wide a landscape digital image is. So for example, when you're posting a portrait image, it's going to force, even if you zoom it out, it's going to force it to be a 4:5 aspect ratio or 8:10 aspect ratio. So you may have been in that situation where you're trying to post an image to Instagram, you click the little arrows to zoom it out, and it's still making you cut off part of the top or bottom. Well, if you leave room at the top or bottom, no big deal. But if you want to make sure that it's going to, and that would be in the shooting process. If you want to make sure you're going to have enough room, then check it as you're shooting or before you post it. And one way you can do that is to simply go to crop. crop, hit the letter R in Lightroom Classic CC. That'll take me to crop, and just simply switch the aspect ratio to 4:5/8:10, because that's what Instagram's looking for. Now you can move the image around, and you can see as a 4:5 or 8:10, I'm still going to have my entire subject from head to toe. I'm going to lose some of the background. Don't care. I would normally not shoot it that tall anyway. But I shot it that tall on purpose so that if I posted this image to Instagram and I had to cut some of it off, I'd be cutting off parts that don't matter. Now, let me show you where that doesn't work so well. So when you, and here, let me actually fix that crop and just remove it again. Let's reset the crop. Boom. All right, so I'm just going to take that back off for the next class. I teach that too. Now, in this case, I shot a lot tighter. So if I were to go into my crop tool and I were to switch to that 4:5, 8:10 that Instagram's going to make me do no matter what, then I get this. So it's like, oh no, what am I willing to cut off? Part of her head? Not really, not that much anyway. Okay, so if I come up a little bit, now I'm cutting off one of her feet completely because I just don't have enough room. And you cannot, in Lightroom at least, you cannot add to the image area. You cannot crop outward or uncrop outward. You can't uncrop more than the image you actually have. So if I were to post it, she'd be losing a foot if I had to post it directly from my Lightroom image this way. So now this also answers the question, and here, let me undo. This also answers the question. People ask me all the time, hey, I'm using Lightroom. Do I need Photoshop? And I always answer it the same way. That depends. I don't know what you do. If you're the kind of person that works on landscape images mostly or travel images mostly, and you do a very minimal amount of editing or adjustments, Lightroom's probably all you need. But if you need to actually edit pixels and do things and work in layers and add type and do all those kinds of things, that's where Lightroom won't be enough because it won't do all of those things. So for example, if I still wanted to keep all of this image, but post it as a portrait as is in Instagram, keep it that 4:5 or 8:10 aspect ratio, here's what I'd do. I'd hit Command E or PC Control E, which tells it to edit this photo in Photoshop. Here it comes in Photoshop. All right. Oh, I had both selected. Let's close this one. All right. We don't need that one. All right. Here it is in Photoshop. And what I want to do in Photoshop is I do want to use the crop tool. So I'm going to hit the crop tool, letter C in Photoshop. And I'm going to do that same 4:5, 8:10 aspect ratio. And it's going to do that just like it did in Lightroom. Here's the difference. Photoshop has content-aware crop. Lightroom does not, because Lightroom can't add pixels to an image. It can't do a destructive thing to your image because it is non-destructive. But Photoshop, you can add pixels, change pixels, delete pixels, modify pixels any way you want. So Photoshop's going to give me the better option here. So with that, I'm going to say, you know what? Crop away from the image. In other words, give me some extra space. Now, normally that extra space would be, I don't know, nothing, blank. But because I've got this content-aware option turned on, when I click OK or commit, it will add in, using the surrounding pixels, add in those missing pixels to give me the rest of the image. Now, in this case, if I could see, I can see a little bit of where it did it, and I would just simply fix that with a blend it in, I should say. With the patch tool, just kind of blend it in a little bit over here. And just, just take care of some of that little bit of area that I still saw. And of course, you could clone, you could do whatever you want to fix that. Now that once I save it, and it's saving right now, the bigger new file, it is a bigger file, it's adding more data to it. It will put it right next to the original in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom CC, and if you were using Lightroom CC. That is something you can't do on mobile because you don't have that capability in the Photoshop apps on mobile, at least not as easy. All right, so now I'd have an image that if I were to crop it 4:5, 8:10, look, I don't lose anything because I've got enough image there. I see her foot, I see her head, I see all of the space plus the extra space it made on the side for me, and now I'd be a way to go. You didn't know that, Jerry, and you're welcome. All right, so with that said, let's get out of this, and let's go on, and let's move on. Let's do a couple more things. Now, I spoke about landscapes, and we did do one quick adjustment using the dehaze effect, it's an effect. So now I'm going to go to a landscape image. I've already edited it once. I'm going to go to the unedited version and show you the kinds of things I would do to make a landscape image better. And of course, with everything, it's to taste. You can do a little, and some people would say, that's great. You can do a little more, and some people would say, that's great. You can do a little more, and some people would say, that's too much. It is totally up to you. These are sliders. You don't have to use all of them just because you paid for them. You don't have to use them at 100 just because you paid for them. So it's totally up to your taste. All right, so I'm going to hit develop, and that will take me into the image. So where I would start is with that same thing I told you about earlier. I would go to my lens corrections, and I would apply the lens correction, and you can kind of see it, especially in the middle of the image. It's taking the image and flattening it out just a little bit. All right, so turning that on, flattens out the image a little bit. If I had any vignetting around the edge, it would take care of that. Next thing I would do, and this is, my workflow's changed a little bit now that Lightroom CC and Lightroom Classic CC have these new profiles, is I would switch to the kind of profile for the image it is. For example, this is a landscape image. I'd probably switch to landscape. Now that made a very subtle difference in the colors. If I wanted a little bit more, I'd go to maybe Adobe Vivid. Now, actually, landscape better on this image. And of course, you can go into the browser and you can get into all these. These are the ones for Camera Raw, but you can get into all the artistic ones, and you can just have all kinds of crazy looks for your image. And you might think, oh, aren't those just filters? Aren't those just presets? And here's the difference. These are not filters. These are not presets. What these are profiles. So they're adjusting the image without adjusting the sliders. If these were presets, in other words, to make the photo look that way, then the sliders would have changed. But because I applied this, the sliders didn't change because it's profile. So I still have all my editing capabilities to go through. So the next thing I might do is I might go in and, well, Rod, I'm glad you're still learning Lightroom and liking it a lot. All right, so next thing I would do is I always try the new and improved auto tone. Auto used to be something you're like, nah, it's not gonna make my image look better. It's not, maybe. Now, most times it's gonna make my image look better, or at least give me a better starting point. I could go through every slider myself and do it myself, and you still can. If you're saying, hey, oh, Adobe, I'm in charge, I'll do it. By all means, do it. But if you're saying, hey, I'm kind of new to this, as some people are, and they're saying that just to me right now, then go ahead and click the auto button because you have nothing to lose. You can always undo it, or undo or change specific attributes that you don't like. And there's one that I know I'm not going to like, so let me show you. I'm going to click auto. And there's a couple I don't like. Number one, it made the image a little darker than I want it. And most times, in my experience, it always lowers contrast. I don't like my contrast lowered. But what it did for most other things, I do like. So I can go in and say, well, I could have done it all myself, but I probably wouldn't have gotten here as fast. Now I can just tweak the things that I didn't like from the auto. So for example, I could say, oh, you know what? I don't like my contrast lower. Actually, I like it higher. Oh, you know what? The exposure, I don't want to lower it. Maybe up it. Well, maybe I do want to lower it, but just not that much. Maybe somewhere around there. And oh, you know what? It didn't affect dehaze or clarity, but it did affect vibrance and saturation. I don't know why it gave me negative saturation. I might actually want a little bit more. And a little bit more vibrance. Now, I got to be careful because that sun's starting to get really orange, and the reflection of it's getting really orange. So I might want to back off that saturation just a bit. Tone that down just a bit more. All right. So again, this is what I meant by to taste. So if you think it's too much still, back off some more on yours. Next thing I might do is I might go ahead and add a little clarity because it is landscape to make those icebergs pop a little bit more. And of course, I haven't met a photo yet that couldn't benefit from a little dehaze. There we go. Now, the only thing I'm loving what's going on up here, but I'm not loving what's going on down here. It's starting to fill in get a little too dark. So I could do that a few different ways. I could use a selective adjustment like we did before and maybe just change exposure. And I'm just going to brighten exposure wherever I paint just a little. And there we go. So I can brighten that area up down here just a hair. And if I made it too bright, which I did, I could always go in and turn it back down. All right, so now that I've painted this area, but if that's too bright or not bright enough, I can brighten it some more or turn it down some more. So it's like adjustments on a brush, the adjustment brush. If I wanted to dehaze that specific area, I can dehaze that specific area. I don't, but if I wanted to, I could. And get that, maybe just a hair of dehaze. There we go. And I can add a little bit more contrast down there, sharpness, so forth and so on. So you get the idea. You can take your photo from something that was just ordinary. Here we'll show you the before and after again. Let's reset this one. So that's where we started. And that's where we are. Now I noticed one thing before I reset that one, or as I was resetting that one, I noticed it tilted a little bit. And that's another one of my pet peeves. Is that if you have a photo that is slightly crooked, especially if it's a landscape, it will stand out like a sore thumb. So let's go back to the crop tool on this particular photo. And while we're here, we can say auto, just like we did auto tone, and say, hey, Lightroom, if you can figure out how straight this photo needs to be, go ahead and straighten it for me. If not, you can always click angle, and you can drag out what should be straight. It's only slightly crooked. That should be straight. And now it's not crooked anymore. So crooked landscapes are evil. Don't, unless it's like at a 45-degree angle and you did it on purpose. Otherwise, don't make or don't forget to fix your crooked horizons if they are in fact crooked. All right, last but not least, because we are already out of time, but let's go ahead and switch over to HDR. HDR, and actually we'll do Pano. Let's see, which one do I want to do first? Let's go, well, we're here, let's do HDR. I've got a photo that I took in Iceland. It's right here. That's what it looks like. It's crooked, I know that. It's also it was their weird sunset where the sun really doesn't go down. It stays light outside this time of year. So I got some good shadow areas there. I got some good highlights there, and I kind of want to put it all together in one exposure. So I'm going to select all three, and I can right click or do Control H, and I'm going to just say Photo Merge HDR. When I do my HDR, it will auto align the images. These were taken on a tripod, so they should be pretty aligned. It will apply that auto setting that I was talking about, that auto tone, and auto tone is making it look better. The one thing it will not do is fix my crooked horizon line, but I'm going to go ahead and say merge. And that will go ahead and put together in the background. It's doing this in a background process. It will merge together a new raw file that is a DNG ready to go to be edited. So I still have my three originals. Here, let me move it over to the side. I've still got my three originals, and I've got my new HDR. That is something that currently Lightroom Classic CC and Photoshop CC are the only ones that do it. Lightroom CC and Lightroom Mobile do not put together HDR images. All right, now let's go ahead and finish it. Just because you've made the HDR doesn't mean it's done. It doesn't mean it's got everything that it needs done to it. So for example, I would still go either before I made the HDR or after the fact, still go in and check for that lens pro. Ooh, look at how much of a difference that made. Look at how bowed or pushed out it is in the middle. Once I enable that lens correction, really flattens it out. All right, next thing I would do, and again, you can do that to the three originals, so you don't have to do it after the fact, or you can do it after the fact. It doesn't matter which one you do it in. Next thing I would probably do is try that auto. Oh, sorry, in this case, it already did it because, remember, it did that part of the HDR. So this is the auto. So let me go ahead and make my adjustments from here. Again, it took the contrast down. I prefer to have my contrast usually higher. It lowered the exposure a bit. I may or may not live with that. I'll increase the vibrance a bit to make that blue in that water stand out a little bit more. Saturation just a bit. Ooh, that might be too much saturation. Hold up, back off. A little bit more clarity. Yeah, I like the clarity on this image. And last but not least, we can't have everything leaning over to the right. Now, here's the problem. I kind of like these rocks down here. That just a good landscape image has a foreground, a middle, and a you know, out there. If I straighten it, it's most likely going to crop off the bottom. So here's what's going to happen. If I straighten this photo right now, the way it should be, like that, then I'm going to lose the bottom. See how much of the rocks and everything I'm going to lose? No, it still looks like a good photo. And still a little bit of foreground right there. But if you want to have more, you're going to do that in Photoshop, like I showed you. So let's undo it. Let's edit the HDR in Photoshop. Command E, Control E on Windows. And David, you're completely welcome for these streams. All right, next thing we're going to do is, all right, what to choose? All right, Jerry's saying profiles and presets are overwhelming. How do you decide personally what to choose? What makes my photo look better, in my opinion? That's what I choose. If I don't think it's making my photo look better or the desired look, then I don't use it. All right, so now if I were to hit the letter C again for crop, this time we're not going to do the 4:5 aspect ratio. Let's clear that out. And let's just simply escape. There we go. And now I were to straighten this, I've still got my content aware turned on. So if I were to say straighten it like this, when I let go, it's going to straighten it. It's going to get ready to straighten it. And then I notice that it's still going to crop off some of the bottom. I can extend this out and say, you know what? Don't crop off that much. Keep some of that. Now, this rock may get weird because it has so much of a gap to fill in. Let's see what happens. Click OK. It'll take a few minutes to generate all those missing pixels. And again, the bottom may still need some work. Yep, I figured the bottom would still need some work. But look, it did a great job on these two rocks. This is perfect. So even if I only have to fix this one, that was worth it, keeping those extra pixels. All right, so now, how do I fix that? Well, this has been copied over. I don't need that. So I can either try and crop or patch it away using the patch tool. Or if that wasn't working to my desired result, I can use the clone stamp, which is probably going to do a better job here. Just kind of clone that away. And also, I noticed that there it created a line in the water here that probably is not belonging here. So it'll take me a few minutes to clean this up, but basically I'm just going to try and make it look like that rock was natural. Now in this case, it may be better to not have this piece in the water. I haven't decided yet, but let's see what I can do. I might just do a little clone stamping there. Yeah, actually, I'm okay with keeping it in the water now. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Maybe fix that one little piece there and then I'd be happier. That looks repeated. Looks like it's been stretched down. And basically, it's up to you. Until you decide that you think that looks okay the way it is, you're done. If not, keep working on it. I could say, well, let me see what it looks like if I took this whole piece away. And maybe I like that better. It's just really your choice at this point. So let's keep that for now. Save that. And of course, you can work on a different layer and have multiple layers until you've decided completely what you want. And it saved it, close it, switch back to Lightroom. Here comes in Lightroom. Oh, sorry, there it is. There's my new edited version. And I noticed one thing still kind of not happy with the sky up here. So I'm going to use a graduated filter. The graduated filter is in Lightroom CC and Lightroom Classic and in mobile. And yeah, I'm going to use exposure. Just turn it down a bit. I was just deciding what preset I was going to use, but exposure is probably going to be a good one. I want to make my sky look a little bit more dramatic. And I'll just pull that down a bit to maybe right there. And I can always tweak it from here. So if I thought that's not dramatic enough, I could bring it down a little bit more. I could add a little bit more saturation up there. Make the sky just a little bluer. That's starting to get where I want to be. I could maybe add a little dehaze up there. Oh, not too much. And then play around with my midpoint until I got it where I wanted it to be. And that was originally these photos turned into this photo. So play around, have fun, make your photos look better in Lightroom CC, and a little Photoshop never hurt. All right, last but not least, I promised you a pano. Let's do a pano real quick. All right, well, cool. People on Twitter are saying nice, so much more natural. All right, let's do a pano. So I've been doing this castle one for a while, so let's do something new. This was also from that same trip in Iceland. This was taken with a DxO connected to my iPhone. So it just kind of took the first shot, turn, took the second shot, turn, took the third shot, turn, took the fourth shot, turn. Now I want to combine them all into one. And we'll just right click on all four of them. And photo merge, this instead of HDR, this time we're going to do Panorama or Control M on your keyboard. You have three different projections. Spherical is probably going to be the one you use the most, but you could play with the other ones, see what you want. Now we're in that same situation. This was handheld, so there's a lot of white space left over. Even with a tripod, you're going to have some white space left over. And if I auto crop it, oh, it looks good. I'm going to keep a good portion of the subject, but now I don't have to auto crop anymore. Let's turn off auto crop, and let's use the new, fairly new, boundary warp. Boundary warp is simply a slider. I'm going to drag it slowly for dramatic effect. Here we go. It warps your image into the empty space, like so. So you don't have to crop it away. You don't have to lose part of your image because you didn't fill it properly. Now, I drag it slowly. You don't have to drag it slowly. You can just jump to 100% and away you go. Now when I say merge, it'll merge that together and keep, can you please talk about opening Lightroom for the first time? Well, the first time you open it, it's going to be empty. There won't be any photos in it until you import your photos. So you import your photos into Lightroom Classic. It will import them wherever they are, meaning if you've already got them in files and folders on your hard drive where you want them to be, import, just click add, and it will add them into Lightroom, keep them where they are. Lightroom CC, on the other hand, is going to add them and start syncing them to the cloud as a backup. So your originals are always backed up and available to you on any of your computers that you have Lightroom CC running on or your mobile devices. All right, so now I've got this panel. Very nicely done. And of course, it's a new raw file. I could take it into the develop module. Let's get out of, there we go, into the develop module and do whatever else I want to do to it. So I could try a lens profile correction, even though there might not be one for that camera. Oh, there is one for that camera. All right, so there's one for the DxO. And I could go in, of course, and try, vivid. I could try landscape. I could try these profiles. I could be artistic. And then I could also click auto and see what I get there. And then I go from there. I don't like my contrast lowered. I don't like my contrast lowered. And now I've got even a better photo than I originally started with. So you can always, 99.9% of the time, make your photos look better if you know what to look for. And usually what you look for is anything that bothers you. If there's something about the photo you wish were different, 9 times out of 10, you can make whatever that is better in Lightroom and Photoshop. Now, that goes without saying that if it's a really crappy photo, you can't pull off a miracle. Well, you could if you had the time, but you're most likely, time and skill. You're most likely, if you're starting with a bad photo, you're not going to end up with a perfect photo. You're just going to end up with a better crappy photo. All right, so is DxO1 lens attachment for the iPhone? No, it's a fully 24 or 20 megapixel camera for the iPhone. So it attaches to the Lightning port and has a memory card in it, and you're shooting with that camera and using your iPhone as the viewfinder. So it is its own camera. It's not just the lens. And it shoots RAW, and it shoots either 20 or 24 megapixels. I can't remember which. All right, so with that said, I think I'm out of time. Let's see if I got time for one more really quick one. Oh, yes, let's do one more. This is worth it. I talk about this all the time. I don't know that I have another example to show, so I have to show this, the one that I've been showing. Have to come up with another example, but here it is. Here's the one I've been showing. Not that I mind showing it, I've shown it a million times, but just show something new. White balance. White balance, incorrect white balance means that your photo has a color cast on it. In this case, the color cast is yellow. The people's skin in this photo, their shirts in this photo, the tag in this photo, the pants in this photo, all have too much yellow in them. Their eyes are yellow. Like, that's when you know you've got a color cast problem, where everything in the photo is one color. Like, everything has just got this tint on it that doesn't belong. So proper white balance can be achieved in Lightroom with the white balance eyedropper. There it is, that little eyedropper right there on the side, whether it's Lightroom CC, mobile, or Lightroom Classic. When you click the eyedropper, what you should be going and looking for to click on is something that's around 18% gray. And I know it'd be great if every photo you ever took, the person was holding a gray card, and then you took other photos without the gray card, and you could use that. Of course, there was no gray card here. I don't have anything that's 18% gray. Maybe his belt buckle, and I can look at the preview on the left-hand side and say, yeah, that's way better color than everything being yellow. So if you got something that should be gray, and look at the preview in the upper left corner, that's going to be the right color, then click, because that's what that preview is for. What if I didn't have the 18% gray? What would I look for? The next thing I would look for, or gray, the next thing I would look for is something that should be black or should be white. Her blouse should be black. If I hover over it, yep, that's going to fix it. His shirt should be white. White's a tough color because there has to be some data there. If it's just blown out white highlights, then like the sun, it's not going to work. But if there's white pixels there in the shirt or black pixels there in her shirt, then that will probably work. But you really want to target something that's 18% gray. Click, boom, fix the white balance, just like that. All right, and then you could always say, well, people tend to look better warmer, yellower, a little bit, not that much, but a little warmer. So if that's the case, you can always go back and override what you just did. That set it to what it should be, but you could always go back in and say, well, I want to warm their skin up a little bit, not totally yellow, just a little bit more. All right, so let's tweak it just a little bit more. I would say right about there. That makes the skin look a little bit more natural. If they're blue and cold looking, zombie looking, then your white balance may be correct, but it's not good for people. So just tweak it up a little bit with the temperature, move it more towards the yellow until the people look like people again. All right, so with that said, this photo is also crooked, so I just can't leave it like this. You can also just simply tilt it until your heart's content, until you get it as straight as you want it to be, and then away you go. All right, so with that said, how to reset all the settings that I made before. How do I use Lightroom's default? Okay, so with every photo, there's a big reset button right there. So if you just hit reset, and that will reset the photo back to its original, the way you brought it in. And you can select multiple photos and hit reset. So if you want to reset them all and then start over, you can absolutely do that. Okay. What tells you 18% gray? There's no feature that tells you it's 18% gray. It's just you like Google 18% gray and you get in your mind what that looks like. And that's what you'd be looking for in a photo. And by the way, you're rarely going to have something that's perfectly 18% gray. So don't get caught up on the percentage. Look for something that should be gray. Let's start there. His belt buckle's not 18% gray. I guarantee it. It's probably lighter than that, but it's gray. So that was all I needed to start. So don't get caught up on the 18%. That's a technical thing. Don't worry about it. Look for something that should be gray. If not, look for something that should be black. If not, look for something that's white, that's not completely blown out. All right, like the light here would not be a good source of white because it's completely blown out, I'm sure. But his shirt had some details, some pixels in it. That would be okay. Okay, this is great. The comments are good. Questions are good. And I'm out of time, though, so I'm going to end the stream. We went way over our time, but the feedback and you guys were great, so I kept going. So with that said, cheers, everybody. I want to thank you for watching. And thank you for making, this is Adobe Photoshop? Nope, we did Adobe Photoshop earlier. This is Adobe Lightroom Classic CC. All right, so with that said, Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.